decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot! Artest looking, gets it to Bryant. Bryant dribbling, has to put it up for the buzzer. Banks it! Oh! He banks it!
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. Today, I am accompanied by a very special guest, my good friend, Sean Barnard. Make sure if you're not already following Sean and getting all of his NBA/Sixers content via Twitter, make sure you're following him at Sean_Barnard1. Sean, how are you doing today, my friend?
Pretty good, man. I mean, we're more than halfway through the NBA season now, firmly in the middle of NBA trade rumor season, and things are picking up all around. So I can't complain. Life is good.
100%. And yeah, we're going to get to go through a lot of that information that we've been receiving lately, including all of the James Harden rumors. It seems like they're endless at this point. We'll get into a little bit of the Sixers talk just as far as like their last game. We'll recap that Spurs matchup. Get into a little bit of the Pelicans tonight. Obviously, the Pelicans are without a lot of their players, so it's not much to talk about there. It's going to be more about the Sixers. And then we'll just talk about the recent stretch of play by the Sixers as far as some of those terrible losses and some of the great wins they've had this season. And then we'll follow up. Obviously, I said we'll get into the James Harden talk about his fit with Philly. And then we will talk about just a few quick headliners around the NBA. Like to take a quick trip around the NBA at the end of every show here. So we'll get into a little bit of that. Phil already chiming in here. Harden and Embiid could be a deadly pair, but does Harden want to be here? It's an interesting question. It's one that we will touch back on once we get to that segment of the show. But before we do that, obviously a little bit of house cleaning. If you're not already following DSM Media, make sure you're following them at DSM_media. If you're not already following myself, you can find me at Scotty Drowned. And I also want to shout out our sponsors over at Manscaped. Check out manscaped.com. Use code DSM for 20% off and free shipping. And that's at manscaped.com. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, gentlemen. But Sean, let's get directly into this, my man. I want to talk about this Spurs and Sixers matchup. I want to start with that. Kind of, just get your thoughts on that matchup. Any takeaways you had from that game?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty similar to pretty much what we've seen from the Sixers this year. And I mean, they seem to have turned a corner in recent games, and that's pretty much entirely due to the level of play Joel Embiid has been at. And there's been so many games where it feels like the rest of the Sixers roster is pretty much finding ways to lose games or make it close, and then Embiid finds a way to bail him out. And that was a little bit of the same case here. I mean, the Sixers held control for pretty much that whole game. It still was close to the end. Embiid banged home 2 clutch free throws to secure the game. It was a 2-point game with under a minute to play after leading for pretty much the whole game. So there still was that a little bit of a comeback from the opposing team. But overall, a pretty solid win for the Sixers. I think Tobias Harris was very effective, which I think was big for him. He really carried the Sixers offense during that stretch in the fourth while Embiid was off the court, which is exactly what we need his role to be. And I was happy to see him succeed in that. So overall, a pretty solid team win.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. It was an overall solid team win. Obviously, you would like to see them take care of the Spurs a little bit better. Just as far as getting Embiid, that seems like that's not a thing this season, right? Like getting Embiid rest in the fourth. But the Spurs did have a lot of reinforcements in this game compared to the last time the Sixers matched up with them. And ultimately, the Sixers are down a few guys right now, and I think that's getting overlooked a little bit. Now, obviously, stemming back to that loss against the Clippers, there's no excuses. I mean, they don't have Paul George, they don't have Kawhi. There's no excuses there, but you don't have Seth Curry, you don't have Danny Green, you don't have Matisse Thybulle, so you're forcing one Charlie Brown Jr. to be inserted in this starting lineup, which I'm interested to get your thoughts on him. How he's looked so far. Obviously, they signed him to that two-way contract, and then he kind of solidified himself in the rotation with these guys out. Is there any place in your mind where he gets minutes once these guys get back, or is that just totally a depth void right now that we're facing?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I mean, I'm a big Charlie Brown Jr. guy. I took a trip down to the Blue Coats game a couple weeks ago when he was a full-time Blue Coats guy, and he was a guy that kind of caught my eye. I had a chance to talk to him for a decent bit after. He was a super funny guy, super charismatic, a guy that really I grew to like along with his game. And then from there was when he got his 10-day hardship with the Mavs, and then immediately after the 10-day hardship with the Sixers, and found a way to stick from there. He made more happen in his limited minutes than Aaron Henry really has all year. So he found a way to stick and take that two-way contract. The thing I will say, and what appeals to me the most about Charlie Brown, is it's just the athleticism and the body that he has is such a positive change on this team. And he competes, he brings energy. Like he's been more active going for offensive rebounds than any player that I've seen on the Sixers all year, which is relevant. And he's not like that big. And as a cutter, I mean, I would love to see the percentage around the rim go up a little more. He's left a lot hanging there, but there's many plays where Embiid has found him where he's just active. And I mean, realistically, Charlie Brown Jr. should not be a guy playing regular minutes on a contending team. But I think the biggest takeaway is just how effective kind of that model of player could be if the Sixers can find like an elevated version.
No, I think that is such a great point you make there, Sean. It is this, looking at the model or the style of play that Charlie Brown Jr. plays with, like you don't necessarily have to keep him in your rotation or anything like that, but it does give you a glimpse of what a active hustle player looks like similar to what the Marcus Smarts of the world, like a guy that is obviously he's bigger than Marcus Smart, but a guy that is still not at that stature that he should be in the paint getting rebounds over big men, but hustle does that. Now, what I will ask you is on the other side of that, does that speak to the effort level of other Sixers players more, or does that speak to that's just what the Sixers are lacking? They need that style of player. Like, could another player on the Sixers fit that role if they just played a little bit harder?
Yeah, I think Matisse and him are kind of cut from a similar mold. And I think Charlie Brown Jr., obviously not to the level of Matisse, but he's going to be always a defensive first guy. He's very active hands. I mean, we saw in the Spurs game, the steal and slam right before the half, which was cool. I mean, I think the cutting to me is the biggest thing. Furkan's improved. Matisse has improved a lot. I think Charlie Brown Jr. is probably one of the best cutters that they've had. And with the growth in Embiid's passing, I think surrounding him with cutters is just as big a factor as with shooters at this point. And I mean, like that, the wraparound pass to Furkan was like the one that catches your eye in the game, but there's a lot of that. And I mean, what gets lost in I don't want to bring up the Jokic Embiid debate, but what gets kind of lost in Embiid doesn't have the guys as options to hit cutting to the basket, there's just not the same kind of system. And I think it would be super interesting to add more of those type of players, which Charlie Brown fits that mold, to just see what happens. And I mean, I have grown a lot of faith in Embiid's ability as a passer and IQ. And I think the lack of assist, he gets a lot of hockey assists where it's kind of one more pass and then a guy takes a shot. But I think his assist numbers would grow tremendously if there were more active guys off ball.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Yeah, easy looks. And that's something that the Sixers need to find more of. I think we both can agree on that as well. They don't get a ton of easy buckets. Like Embiid, it looks easy, right? Like he's getting double teamed and shooting over 2-3 people at a time. But those aren't easy buckets. Like Tobias Harris shooting a mid-range jumper against over two people is not an easy bucket. And so, we don't see them getting those easy buckets. The other guys, they just mostly shoot threes if they're open or, an occasional pump fake, whatever the case may be. Maxey's the guy that, drives consistently, which Korkmaz, I've seen him kind of adjusting. He's driving a little bit more, trying to get himself in a groove because he was going through a terrible shooting stretch there for a little while, but he's kind of coming out of that. But, Charlie Brown Jr., it is interesting because when you're talking about him, it's he's cutting, he's kind of filling that dunker spot sometimes, cutting on that baseline. And it's is he just really fitting in well there? We want the percentages to go up with the finishing, but, he is still new to this team, new to Joel Embiid, new to this offense. So like, does it make it that much more impressive that he's finding his spots like that, where a guy like, I hate to say that, like a guy like Ben Simmons struggled to find his spots in the lane sometimes. So like, is it, I guess what I'm saying is like, is it Charlie Brown Jr.? Like, do you keep him in the rotation for those reasons? Or do you look at him and try to coach Matisse to like how do you go to Matisse and be like, do more of that? Or go to Korkmaz and be like, do more of that, when this is a guy that is probably behind them in the rotation?
Yeah, I think Matisse has improved a lot in that aspect as far as his cutting, him in the dunker spot. I think Matisse and Embiid have more chemistry in the dunker spot than we've seen with Embiid and Simmons throughout their whole career, which I think is noteworthy. Brown and Thibault, I think, are cut from the same mold, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. I mean, these minutes will be Matisse's when he comes back, I think, for the most part. Charlie Brown Jr. at the end of the day still is a two-way guy. It's pretty crazy that he's gone from a full-time G League player to a 10-day hardship guy to a two-way to in the starting lineup for the Sixers within like a month span. Like that is ridiculous, kind of just how quickly that happened. So I don't think it's for the long haul. I mean, the Sixers are still short bodies. I don't expect him to be starting any games once like the full roster returns, but I do think he will be a guy that sticks and gets minutes and will be in fact impactful as like an energy guy.
Yeah, I like that. I like that answer, and I think it makes the most sense. And hopefully he can, just continue to impress. I mean, he's done probably the most that he could have done with this opportunity
For sure.
with the Sixers. So it's great to see that. The next thing I want to talk about, obviously, Embiid, watching him ascend, and as we think about what he's done this season, specifically in the month of January, if you just look at his numbers, 33.8 points per game, 10.5 rebounds per game, assists, 4.9 assists per game. He's shooting 55% from the field, 36% from the 3-point, 82% from the free throw line, and about 1 block a game. Obviously, it's an incredible month. He's on this incredible stretch of road games, 12 straight games, 12 straight games of 30-plus points on the road, which was a franchise record. Is this sustainable for Embiid? Like, is this just who he's turning into? Like, is this part of his ascension to his peak? Like, when we think about Embiid in his prime, and I know everybody's talking about the window of his prime, where I don't know about you, Sean, and I think this is another good point about Embiid. I'm starting to think that we are not that close to Embiid's end of prime as we may have thought. So I'm just interested on your thoughts of Embiid's ascension and his continued growth as a player in the NBA, and where you really think he could head with this. Like, is he still going to get better than what he is right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to put into words just what like we've seen over these past games. I mean, more points than minutes in the past 4 games. A guy that just has been purely dominant, and I do think there's been like a change just within him as far as like this is who Joel Embiid is. Like he just looks healthier, he moves better. He like it doesn't. I don't have the same kind of panicked like every time he hits the floor. Every time like he just looks healthier, both mentally, physically, everything. He looks locked in. This is the best basketball we've ever seen him play, and like to this point, it's absolutely the top of ascension. I think from here, like obviously the goal is for the Sixers to contend for a championship, and with that, there needs to be adding like another key piece, which we're going to talk a bunch about.
Right.
But that the next step for Embiid, like I do think there's a world where I have no doubt in the talent of Embiid, like for him being able to do it. But I think like there is a world where the best version of Joel Embiid could be a guy who like dominates on the boards, dominates on the defensive end, and is still like a 20-point per game scorer versus like the 30 plus per night versus he goes for now. Or maybe there is a world where he continues to be the offensive force and still do it. I mean, the numbers are absolutely absurd. Like this is just like pure greatness that we're watching. So it's so cool that he's gotten to this point. I agree. I think he's like, there's nothing he can do on a basketball court that would surprise me at this point. The point guard Joel, him taking it coast to coast, he just can do it all. And like the clips of him next to Jordan and Kobe is just so cool and so just absurd. We're seeing this from a 7-foot plus guy who has a legitimate handle now, has a legitimate jumper, and the game just looks so easy for him now. And I'm just so like grateful to be watching this.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess what I'm thinking when I talk like that about Embiid and his ongoing ascension, his continued development is, we do have players in the NBA who average over 30 points per game. You know what I mean? Like Kevin Durant can do that. Steph can do that. And I'm just wondering if Embiid is ascending that high, that maybe these numbers are just normal. And yeah, we do still need to add more offense on top of that, right? Like, that's the interesting part about James Harden. And obviously we'll talk about that in just a few moments. But what he would bring, or what a player like that would bring to beside Embiid. I mean, you talk about facilitating. He averages 10 assists a game this season. And looking at what he could do for this Sixers offense beside Embiid as far as a shot creator for not only himself and other players. So it's amazing to think about, the fact that Embiid is in the best shape of his life. Is that why he is so able to do the things that he's doing on the court this season? And why can't he continue to do that with this newfound motivation, as he describes his son, and having a kid in his life, and how that's like motivated him to a next level to get in the best shape of his life. I don't see why he can't keep this up. Now, obviously the other side of the spectrum is injuries, right? Like that's what I feel like everybody is predicating this Joel Embiid's prime around, right? But like you said, when he falls to the ground, he's a lot lighter now. I mean, it takes a lot less on his body as far as a toll. And I think, just making all the positive strides towards a healthy, elongated career is what Embiid's doing right now. Like, he's not doing like yes, he is still showing the freakish athleticism from time to time, but he's not going in there all game banging around. Like, he has so much touch, so much shooting ability on the outside and in the mid-range that he doesn't have to take the wear and tear of like a Shaquille O'Neal down the stretch that had to operate in the paint, constantly banging bodies. So it's just an interesting conversation as we look at Embiid in his prime and his growth, because who would have thought that he could do what he's done this season after what he did last season?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Did you maybe you didn't, and I don't remember exactly how I felt about it at the beginning of the season. I think I was kind of optimistic that Embiid could grow even more. But what were your thoughts, leaving last season, where obviously he put up the runner-up MVP performance? Some thought he was MVP anyways, compared to what this is. Like, how is he not at the top of the MVP conversation right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say like I didn't expect it to last, but I did. There was a part of me that thought last year was like the peak of Joel, and I mean, I think the passing this year has been the biggest thing that has jumped out to me improvement wise, and that's for a lot of reasons. Like the Ben Simmons being off the court, that's a lot of that is Embiid being forced to throw into that role and be able to have to distribute more, and the offense entirely flows through him, which I do think is cool as far as like his development and has pushed him to do more things, which even as the Sixers do complete this team and build like a true contender, those are still improvements that in the long haul are noteworthy and are going to help him and the team as a whole. So I do think that's cool. I'm shocked how far the bar has risen. And we talked about this when you were on the Pick Swap podcast the other day, but just how cool it is to just watch. Like, think about when Joel Embiid was drafted, there were legitimate questions about like, if these were career threatening injuries, and he sat 2 years without playing a game, and there was legitimate, like, is this guy ever going to be able to play basketball? And just to see him ascend to like this level of legitimate like NBA stardom is just so cool. Like, there's a legitimate case for him being the best player in the NBA right now, and he's ours to watch. He's ours to enjoy, which is so cool.
Oh, that was a beautiful way to put it, Sean. And I think we can kind of leave, Embiid talk at that, because you said that so well. It's an honor to get to watch him play for the Sixers, honestly. And I think we can never say that enough. It's like we're almost beating a dead horse with the way we've been talking about Embiid. But I think the overall goal, and I would hope that you would agree in a sense, but the overall goal of us talking about this, what seems like every episode, is us appreciating it and acknowledging it and respecting it every single day and every single game that he puts on for us. Because I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, every once in a while I do expect a down game from him, and we're not getting it. Like, and that's fine. Like, that's awesome, right? Like, it's an awesome experience, but it's kind of like you're waiting for him to have a clunker and he's just not doing it. Now, knock on wood, I don't want to see it, but it is interesting. But the next person I wanted to ask you about, as far as the Sixers team and kind of riding that point from the Spurs matchup, because Tobias had a pretty solid game, 18 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, shot over 50% from the field. One 3-point attempt, which is still a concern. I saw him pass up quite a few 3-pointers in that game. But as we look at his numbers in January, he is getting closer to the 50. I won't say 40. That's a wide margin because he's sitting at 36% for the month there. 84% from the free throw line, 48% from the field goal range. It's getting better. It feels like it's getting better. It seems like it's trending in the right direction, but I'm wondering what you're seeing from Tobias lately. Obviously, still had that 7-point night that feels like yesterday, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Tobias that I think goes underappreciated and that why the Sixers do need him, and these buckets don't look easy ever, but it is important, like him being able to isolate and just go get a bucket. And the reason that is so important is because of how much is asked out of Embiid, like on both ends of the floor, of being the anchor on defense, being the motor on offense. Like there just have to be plays where he can just watch somebody else do things. And when we think about the other ways this offense generate, like Seth Curry, who's probably Seth Curry, I'll include Curry and Maxey. Those are both guys who almost every time they score, Embiid is involved in the play, whether it's a dribble handoff, setting a screen, doing some sort of work. Like he's still working to get them to score. And when Tobias can just like at least try to go get a bucket and make it as smooth as it looks by his standards, like that's still important for Embiid to like take the legs off. And I would obviously love if there's another guy like ahead of him on the pecking order to be able to go do that. And I think that should be the goal for the Sixers. But that is a role that needs to be filled for someone, for Embiid to just keep his legs alive for an entire season. So I do think that goes underappreciated for Tobias. It has been better to an extent. I mean, I also feel bad for he's simply not the guy that everybody wants him to be. And again, that's not a Tobias Harris. Like he is who he is. And I mean, it's unfortunate. I think he did look better alongside Simmons. It was built for him to play alongside Simmons. So there's a part of me that does hold sympathy, but at the end of the day, I still don't think he's a good fit on this team.
Yeah, no. And I think that's what we're coming to the conclusion of. And I guess, well, I'll save that question for the next segment, actually. But when you're looking at kind of his fit beside Ben Simmons and being able to get him open shots and open looks to make his life simply easier, even creating driving lanes, like getting open shots and then driving the lane, off closeouts makes your life easier. So it is an interesting conversation. I think what Chile said here, the eye test, and I think that's where everybody watches the games. And I think we're trying to gravitate from the box score checking, which rightfully so. You should trust your eyes and what you're seeing. And, just sometimes the buckets, even when made, look really difficult.
Yeah.
And then you have the short layups. I mean, the short layups just don't end, man, the bunnies. And I can't stand those. Those are the ones that really, get me feeling everybody else that's disgruntled in the moment about Tobias Harris. That's one of my pet peeves with him, but I think that's what we all can agree on is that, obviously the contract, it is what it is. If we're looking at an ideal fit beside Embiid, that's not it. I think we kind of got desperate in that moment, with Jimmy and the Ben situation and having to keep one of them, right? Like not to totally lose everything that you traded for that season. And they ultimately made that deal with Tobias, which I don't think they looked at it as like a bad fit. I think it was just like, okay, it's an okay fit, right?
Yeah.
Like if he can improve 3-point shooting, if he can shoot more threes, it can be a solid fit. But now it's looking kind of like an average fit to me, and that's what you'll get, average results. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we move on to the Harden scenario and all the rumors regarding that, looking at Tyrese Maxey. You mentioned him earlier, and it seems like in the month of January, he's kind of like quietly performing well and consistently. Now, he's not having those like explosions, 25 plus points, 30 points like he had in December, but he's hovering around that 14, 15, 16 point mark just about each game. And he's averaging 16.4 points per game, under 1 turnover, which is huge, 4.4 assists per game in January, 43% from the field, 51, close to 52% from 3, and 91% from the free throw line. Do you think that he's quietly finding his game, his space, his opportunities to get shots and drive the lane? Is he quietly finding himself beside Joel Embiid?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been progress in that. I still think there's more to grow. I still think there's plenty more. I can't get enough of him, Maxey, being aggressive. An aggressive Tyrese Maxey is a good Tyrese Maxey. I think Embiid is doing his best possible to kind of uplift his confidence. You see the post game comments, the Instagram posts, the everything. Like, I do think they're calling him the franchise. Like, I think Embiid is really trying to harp on that because, I mean, when we look at this Sixers team, I do legitimately think the mindset from Daryl Morey is that Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey are the future pieces right now, and pretty much everyone else, there's at least some standards of movement possible. And I think it's cool how much the faith in him has already increased. I like when he runs with the bench unit as well and just goes and get his. I do like that in the rotation. And I mean, they're playing this kid a ton. Like in the Spurs game, he played 42 minutes. He played and he's young, he can do it, but like that's a lot. And there's also like we got to get another ball handler to at least let him have some sort of rest. But it's cool how much they're throwing at this kid. He's handled everything so perfectly. Like you can't ask much more than what we're given. I still am. So I'm hoping for more. I think it's something that will continue to get better, but definitely signs of progress.
And when you talk about asking for more, are you asking for more like this season? Like, do you think that he could get to another level this season, or do you think that that's something that may come, over an off season where he gets more time to work maybe with the team, maybe with Embiid, one-on-one, getting that chemistry down? Or do you think that this is something they can improve on this season? When you talk about all the COVID time and injuries that have kind of succumbed this team, as they get closer to the playoff run, do you think that he could fill in and maybe even become that second fiddle? Because obviously, as we're seeing in the rumors, it's looking very well like Ben may not be moved, which in return means that Embiid's not going to get that second star that we're really looking for this season. So do you think Maxey can fill that void, or do you think he still hovers around that 16, 17 point mark? And do you think that even matters? Do you think that he could improve his what would you call it? His input on the team's success without increasing his point total per se, like in the way he gets points maybe?
Yeah, so I think long term, I would like a truer point guard to kind of free Maxey of that responsibility. And Maxey's done a pretty good job improving as a passer, as a guy kind of choreographing the offense. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's him. I think he's a guy that goes out, gets his own buckets, score. He's a scorer at heart. And I would love to see him freed, completely able to do that. I think in the long term, that's what I hope is the outcome of kind of his career arc, that he slides into that kind of spark scoring role. And that I still think that's with the starting lineup with all these guys. And in the short term, I just would love to see him, like, he's still too passive at times in the offense, especially in the fourth quarter, especially late in games. Like, I get he's 21 years old. He's already like exceeded so many expectations that it's hard to be like overly critical of him. But I still want him to be out there getting his on a constant basis. And I think that changing that in his mindset a little bit would go a far way to helping the team right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, talking about going down the stretch, especially in the fourth quarter, you take a load off Embiid with every single bucket that you can get without him having to, take a double team and get out of that, whether it's passing or getting a bucket. So, just taking some pressure off Embiid in a sense. Embiid can still do everything he's doing without that extra load that's being put on him right now, which you definitely don't want to overdo it. But I definitely want to, we've been kind of hovering around the topic all show, and I really wanted to get to some of these Harden rumors with you, Sean. So I'm going to just go down the list here. I think let me see how many I got here. So I got 4 different rumors here regarding the James Harden talk as far as him possibly wanting to leave Brooklyn. So first one we got here is from Shams. 76ers prefer to wait to pursue James Harden or another superstar in the offseason and want to save Ben Simmons for that potential deal over the current market. Per sources with knowledge and rival teams. So basically the Sixers, obviously, as has been rumored, are looking to hold on to Ben Simmons in hopes of a James Harden sign and trade. Then we have Brian and Keith here. James Harden or bust. Sources indicate Sixers are all in, even if it means prolonging Ben Simmons saga. And then he touches on something that's in this article as far as Harden and his camp have maintained a close relationship with Morey. In addition, Sixers co-owner Michael Rubin is also tight with Harden and his friends. We got Jabari Young in connecting the dots. Remember the convo I had with Lil Baby last month. So now we are getting rappers involved in the Sixers rumors. Like, look how far we have come.
Yeah.
So he was able to ask him who introduced him to 76ers co-owner Michael Rubin. Told him James Harden at that point. Figures the relationships with Rubin and Morey would drive this. Also, don't forget about D'Antoni. And then finally, Bleacher Report. I believe this was actually this morning from Jake Fisher. James Harden has not enjoyed living in Brooklyn and has voiced his frustrations regarding Kyrie Irving's part-time playing status. Harden has made it clear he intends to test out free agency, even if it leads him back to the Nets. So a ton of information, a lot of it around the same topic, obviously. What are your thoughts, Sean, as we look ahead, during this Ben Simmons saga, as we look ahead to the trade deadline and then, again, the off season after this season? What are your thoughts on this James Harden, all of these rumors? Where there's smoke, there's usually fire. But what are you thinking here?
Yeah, there's a lot of smoke in this one. And even, I mean, all those you already showed a lot. And we think about like the Sixers front office as a whole. Tad Brown's another name where he's currently the CEO for Harris Blitzer. And Harden referred to him as a father figure in an interview clip. And even I was at the Sixers did a cool thing with Lil Baby where it was something with law enforcement and building off that. I love the renovate strip clubs. Why not? But
oh my God,
yeah, why not? Whatever it takes. That's kind of probably the Sixers' best move to tamper at this point. But I mean, from a basketball perspective, I totally love it. Like I'm been a long-term fan of Harden's game. I think he's underappreciated for how good he is. He is coming towards the tail end of his career, but I still think he has enough juice in the tank to be a legitimate number 2 piece. It's frustrating to me that this is going to have to be an off-season move because it will have to be. I still need to see something at the deadline, but to me, that's like a move to, like, I'm more in the camp of send off Tobias, find some pieces, get something together that at least gives the Sixers like a change in faces and a chance this year. And I'm cool with holding on to Simmons for this. And I mean, to me, it's like there's something that doesn't quite add up, which is how much smoke there is. Cause it's like, this feels like a layup. And I just can't wrap my mind around that being the case. But I don't know. He has a player option going into the offseason for $47 million. It's tough for me to imagine him turning down $47 million to play basketball next year. And as well as when we think about these playoffs coming up, so much can change with just what happened. Like, what if the Nets win a championship this year? You think he's leaving and going that? Like, this to me isn't like a foolproof kind of. I'm not okay with just sitting back and waiting for this to happen, but the Sixers absolutely should keep this option open.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'll ask you, and then I have 2 questions for you to be transparent here, Sean. So is James Harden like the best return that we could expect? And then on top of that, as you speak on that, what you're referring to, him opting back into that $47 million, I'm understanding that would mean he would have to be signed and traded, right? Like not obtained in free agency. Now, what is the difference there for me, and for my viewers, just so we can understand clearly?
Yeah. So I guess the biggest difference, the thing that changes with a sign and trade is that this is the player saying, I'm walking away, I'm leaving. You can get something for me because I want to go to this team and make it easier. So you can get something on the way out the door, or I can just walk and go. So it is kind of like a respect thing. The Sixers did that with Jimmy Butler, with him leaving, and ended with Josh Richardson. It's a much different negotiating standpoint where it's not like the player is way more in control of things because they're saying like, I'm not coming back to play for you. I would prefer to play for this team. So if you want to get something for me, you can. So from that aspect, it does kind of change things, and it makes it easier for him to kind of handpick, like, I want to play for the Sixers, as well as Ben Simmons is a very appealing, like the bar changes a little bit in a sign and trade from a typical trade for what the return is. So Ben Simmons would be a phenomenal return in a sign and trade from the Nets perspective. And then as far as ideal targets, I mean, when we think about the dream targets for this, he's not number one on my list. He absolutely was last year. I was a guy who was heartbroken at the deadline when he went to Brooklyn and it didn't work out coming to Philly. That hurt me a lot. So at that time, that was like this is it. We can win this year. I mean, he doesn't look. I'm confident he flips the switch and can lock back into the James Harden we know once playoffs. But there's a lot more of me watching him this year that he feels a little checked out. It's him kind of going through the motions more. And once again, like it'll flip once playoffs come and he'll be back to the dominant force that he can be. But
yeah,
I guess in my mind, like names like Jaylen Brown, I would consider a little above. Bradley Beal, I would even say a little above. But James Harden's probably my number 3 in terms of ideal top choices.
okay, yeah, and I can get behind that. To be completely honest with you, now what I guess I would ask is, as far as those other targets that you would prefer over him, where would you level the mark of reality? I guess you could say which one of those is he the most realistic target of those 3?
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely the most realistic target of those 3. I think Bradley Beal is still a name to watch. I think I just can't wrap my mind around him being a long term with the Wizards. And I mean, it sounds like he doesn't want to re-sign this offseason.
Yeah.
Who knows what's up with him? And that's definitely a situation to monitor. He's 4 years younger than Harden, which to me is important. And the Beal would be a year older than Embiid versus Harden would be 33 by the time we get him. While Embiid, there's so much talk about Embiid's window and his prime. At the end of the day, he's 27 years old still. Like,
Right.
Sure, the injuries changed the perspective a little bit, but I think there's too much made out of this guy like on his last leg. Like there could be a world where Embiid stays healthy and has 4 or 5 more years of very good high level basketball in him. So I would prefer not to go all in for just this year, which I think there's a couple more years of James Harden, but he's not like a completely clean bill of health like health wise as well. So I don't know. I mean, I think Harden is the most realistic just because of all the connections and all the behind the scenes kind of things tying together. But so I still think that's the most likely.
Okay. And so then my final question regarding this whole situation, I would say, do you pass on like a potential deal from like Sacramento, that's centered around Halliburton, and maybe you get like a Barnes and a Hield, whatever the case may be, some draft compensation? Are you turning that type of deal down, straight up in order to hold Ben for James Harden? Like, would you say that straight up? You know what I mean?
For me, no. I think for Daryl Morey, yes. For me, I mean, and obviously he is much more plugged into the chances of this than I am, but
Yeah.
I have a hard time passing up on like something that is right here and like we know there's concrete can happen versus like this might happen down the line. And for sure, James Harden is much better than any player we could get in that. Ideally for me, I still think Embiid is at the level that we can win right now if we find the right pieces, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the superstar level. The names that keep jumping back onto me are like a Halliburton and John Collins deal. I love the idea of John Collins next to Embiid, just with the addition of athleticism, a guy that can shot block, a guy that can rebound the ball at a high level. That would just take so much responsibility off Embiid. And like he can shoot the ball a little bit. I think he would bring a lot. A guy that's a lob threat would just be another look in the offense. And that to me, if you can do that now, I still don't think that ruins the chances of Harden. Like these are all young guys that can repack. Like if we trade for Halliburton now and then look forward for Harden, when I look at it from his perspective, for him to make the most amount of money, which nobody's going to brush off it like that's not important, would be for him to opt into the player option for $47 million next year and then ask for a trade at the deadline. So that would be the way for him to capitalize the most. And then he can sign that new extension with like the Sixers, if that's the idea. So I think that it's possible like this doesn't even like cement itself this offseason. So for me, I'm personally locked in on if there's an acceptable deal at the deadline, I'm not pulling the trigger for the idea of James Harden, but who knows what Morey's thinking.
Right. Daryl Morey will most likely play his cards for James Harden.
For sure.
That's what it seems like is going to happen. Looking at that deal, just thinking of Sacramento, just because it's been the one that's been most talked about. When I look at like Halliburton, I agree with what you said there, because just the one rumored deal. Carter Hart must have made a crazy TikTok. I'll have to check that out after the show. Shout out to Carter Hart, newest member of DSM Media. Thankful for him. But as we're looking at this potential deal from Sacramento, I'm thinking Halliburton and like maybe a Harrison Barnes. I do prefer Harrison Barnes to Buddy Hield almost. And then throw in like maybe a first round pick or two in that deal. And I think that would probably do it for me, because the way I look at it is, like you said, once you would get to the off season, you can then flip. Maybe you can flip Tobias by himself. Whatever the case may be. Maybe you can flip 2 first round picks in Halliburton and a Matisse for a super. You have so many options once you make that move versus a Ben Simmons that is just simply not playing right now. And then you talk about getting a guy like a Halliburton where you would get to go on a playoff run, see him beside Embiid. What if he does look like a star beside Embiid? So now you have him beside somebody like Embiid who can make other players better because he's just that good. But then also you have an opportunity that you can still move Halliburton if he does shine in that role or shows a lot more promise than maybe another team thought he could show. So there's just a lot of avenues you can go, even with making a move at the deadline, that I kind of don't see why not. Ultimately, if you get Halliburton and it works and he's younger, or maybe you get Halliburton and he's an even better fit than Tyrese Maxey, and now you can move Maxey because you have Halliburton at the point guard spot. Like you still have options there. So I do think it's worth exploring, to your point.
Yeah, and another point, which obviously the core of the idea looking for a trade is for a win now move, but looking past that, like Tyrese Halliburton and Tyrese Maxey as your backcourt partners, aside from the fact that like Tyrese Squared is a fire nickname for them, like, those are two guys that are 21 years old, and that can like that sets you up for life beyond Joel Embiid. And I see the question about Sabonis. I mean, yes and no. What appeals to me about Sabonis is the rebounding. I mean, he's a top 5 rebounder in the league. I've liked his game for a long time. There's going to be a lot of similar issues to what we run into with Tobias Harris, I think, which for me, I don't know. I'm not against it completely, but it would have to be like with several appealing pieces from the Kings for me to be interested.
Would you prefer Sabonis to Tobias Harris? Like if you could get a deal where Tobias gets moved and you get Sabonis in a deal in return, like would you prefer that?
Yeah, I think so. I think just because of the rebounding is there. Like Tobias is not terrific on the board. The Sixers are like 30th in the league last I looked rebounding. I think that was a couple games ago, so that might change, but they're right near the bottom tier. And to me, that's like a real issue. Like a guy that can just be a legitimate plus rebounder, which is another reason why I'm kind of been harping on John Collins, but I think Sabonis could fill that. He does have a little bit of the we would run into some spacing issues, but he is a guy that can score on his own, which would be cool.
And then he follows up with a question about his defense. I'm not sure if you have
nothing to super brag about. He's playable, but not like above average, I would say.
Gotcha. That is good to know when we're looking at these prospects. So yeah, I think I get your drift on the James Harden situation. It's very tricky. Yeah,
for sure.
And there's just a lot of avenues that we could explore that, you don't have to play that waiting game. So it's interesting to think about. I guess before we move on from that, I do want to get to the Pelicans and then a quick trip around the NBA, and then I'm going to get you out of here. When you're looking at Daryl Morey's press conference from last week, there were some interesting, headlines from that press conference. But he mentioned like moving his want to a top 40 player now. Like it's lessened because Embiid has played so well. So a top 40 player or an ascending player, the caliber of Maxey, a young ascending player like that. What were your takeaways from that comment? And then also on top of that, him saying that there is a deal with Sacramento that he would do.
Yeah, I think that was, to me, very notable. I think that was his message to the Kings. Like, if you want your guy, come and get him. Like, if you want Ben Simmons, make me an offer. And then that was followed by the reports of they're not willing to like trade Halliburton or Fox, which to me, if we're talking about the Sacramento Kings, like this is a franchise who hasn't been in the playoffs in over 15 years, hasn't had a winning record in over 15 years. Ben Simmons would automatically be a top 10 like Sacramento King of all time, and frankly is a good bit better than either Halliburton or De'Aaron Fox. So if you're not willing to include them to make this kind of trade, like it doesn't make any sense for me from their perspective. And also, I do think that as much as these Harden talks, I do think are legitimate, I think a lot of this is also like Morey's okay with these coming out, I think, because I think this is also a power play of like somebody looking like, wow, they're cool with waiting for James Harden. I need to make an offer now because like if the Kings are reading this, they're saying like, if we're looking into the offseason, James Harden is significantly better than Tyrese Halliburton as well. So I want to get this done now. So I still think there's some head games and power play there as well. I agree with Morey's assessment, and I think it's notable. First off, it's cool that he legitimately like answers questions and gives you the thought process, because that really is rare with people in that position with GMs and stuff. So respect for him for that. And I agree with his notion of like finding guys to complement Embiid in the proper way and kind of building a team more from like the Milwaukee Bucks aspect of finding guys that complement Giannis rather than like the super team, kind of like the Nets or pretty much any team in recent history you want to pull up. But I think that could work. I think Embiid is good enough to be that guy that if there's the right pieces around him, that could work. So I think it's cool. I think everybody's a little surprised by just how high the level of play we've seen this year. And that calls for changing the plans a little bit.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. And I think we are going to be playing a long waiting game until that trade deadline to see what happens there. But I definitely tend to agree with you. Obviously, if we could secure James Harden, before the trade deadline and know that was a cemented concrete thing, then it would be a different story. But it's hard to be content with waiting. And I think we all can agree with that, especially with the way Embiid's playing. So I do want to touch on this Sixers Pelicans matchup tonight, just briefly. Obviously, it is not like some marquee matchup, but it is another game and another challenge for the Sixers to go out there and prove something. So I guess my first question to you, Sean, regarding this matchup: what are you looking for from the Sixers tonight? What do they need to show you? Do they just need to win the game?
Yeah, I would like a take care of business win. Like this should not be a game that presses them too much. And I mean, the Pelicans are very hurt right now when you look at their roster. I mean, obviously Zion's been out. Brandon Ingram's not playing tonight. Valanciunas not playing. Devontae Graham out. A good portion of their contributors are going to be out tonight. So this should not be a game. Sixers at home. I would love to this be a dominant, take care of business, in control the entire 48-minute win. So I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Well, man. Okay, so Connor Hunt's in the comments here. He's actually heading to the game tonight, which you are too, Sean, right? So,
I will be as well.
Maybe you guys can link up and have a chat, but both of these guys will be in the building tonight at Wells Fargo Center. So hopefully it's good vibes. I would imagine that it's good vibes with both of these studs in the building. What are your thoughts on Furkan? Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't even know about the 15 million, but no, I'm kidding. That was actually a pretty decent contract for Korkmaz in hindsight. 120 to 105. So he thinks it's a comfortable victory. I agree. I think they just need to take care of business tonight. It would be a good night to get Embiid some rest. You don't have to worry about his 30-point road, streak going bad because they are at home. So you could get him some early rest in this game tonight if they can just take care of business. But we know the Sixers do not like to do that. So I will keep my expectations tempered to just winning a win. I wanted to do a little session, as you can see on the screen here, over-under session. And I want to try this out with the Sixers games going forward. It's just something new and fun. I like to gamble, so I like to get my guests' opinion on some of my bets tonight. So first one I got for you, Sean, Embiid. Over or under 30 points tonight. What are you thinking?
I'm going under, and I think that in a good way. I would like for him to not need to have to score 30-plus points for him to take some time off his legs. So I'm rooting under as in the most positive way possible.
Gotcha. And then Tobias Harris, over or under 15 points tonight?
I'll go over. I like Toby's rebounds a little bit. I have him a little plus 100 on 8 rebounds, which I like a lot.
I was going to ask over or under 8 rebounds, so I got your answer there.
Yeah.
The last one for Toby, over or under 1 3-pointer made.
I'm going over. I hope that's the case.
It better be, right?
Yeah.
Then I'm looking over to Tyrese Maxey, over or under 16 points tonight.
I'm also going over. I think this is going to be a good win outside of Embiid tonight.
I like that. Maxey, over or under 2 3-pointers made.
I'm gonna go under a little bit, and I think there's gonna be he's been terrific from beyond the arc. I think there's gonna be a little bit of even out. I know you said 50-something% from 3 in recent games. I think
52% from 3 in January.
Yeah, so I think that'll settle down a little bit. I'm gonna go under, maybe a 1 for 3, 1 for 4 shooting performance tonight.
There we go. I like it. And then finally, Cork Maz, over or under 10 points.
Over. I'm smashing that.
He has picked it up lately. So, and I believe he had his season high against the Pelicans to start the season.
Okay, I'm not sure on that one.
I don't remember him getting over 22 points. I could be wrong though. So I'll leave that one up in the air. But it'll be interesting. Hopefully the Sixers can take care of business like you prescribed there, Sean. I'm hoping so. I would like to see Embiid just get some goddamn rest.
For real.
Finally, Sean, I'm gonna get you out of here so you can get ready for your for the big game tonight. Quick trip around the NBA. Just want to touch a few headlines around the NBA, a few narratives. So we had Harden recently, since we're talking about Harden today. He recently said that there's no consistency from officials on calls. He feels as if he is targeted from game to game. An interesting note, and I told you before the show, but he's actually going to the free throw line more than he was last season. He's at 8.3 free throw attempts this season, where he was at like 7.4 last season. So it's increased by about 1 free throw attempt per game. My thoughts on this, Sean, and I'll let you digress on this, but I would imagine Embiid probably feels the same way, just as far as inconsistency and targeting. But what are your thoughts on the officials this season, what you've been seeing across the board?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think like the change that's being made and taking away these kind of draw fouls are a positive for the NBA. So I agree with the notion that there's some inconsistency in how it's called, and that like some nights these guys get it versus some nights there's not. But I do think it's something that should slowly be taken out of the way. It's different for me. I mean, Harden, I think he was the first guy to kind of fully go all in on like the drawing fouls and the getting arms in between his before he goes up. Like, not that he was the first guy, but I would say in this era, the first guy to take it to the extent that he did. And he'd been a guy that
of it being like a skill.
Yeah, the level of it being a skill and the obnoxiousness of how often he went to the line, I guess. And so I agree with his point for the inconsistencies, but I think I'd probably disagree with him on where I would hope the consistency lies.
I got you, and I tend to agree. I think where my problem with the officials is like similar to what I saw on Sunday in the NFL, and it's like going off reputations. So having that quick whistle, and they kind of did it to Ndamukong Suh in the NFL on Sunday. I saw that whenever he like hit Matthew Stafford, and Stafford like put his foot in his like groin or whatever. But just looking at Embiid, even in some of those situations where he picks up like cheap technical fouls,
for sure.
Like, what are you calling this on? Because it's not based on what actually happened. It's based on intent or reputation of that said player. So that's my one thing that I kind of hate about the officiating.
Yeah, agreed there.
That comes with human discretion, though. That's what's going to be involved in human discretion, whether we like it or not. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about, and this one has been pretty controversial. I won't say it's controversial. I think everybody kind of agrees in the same sense around what happened. But just, the talk of the town in a sense. But thoughts on Grayson Allen's foul on Alex Caruso and its place in the NBA? I'm a Duke guy. Yeah. I ride with my man Grayson Allen. I think I defended him right after, and I take that back. I will take it back. I think it was not, there's no place for that in the NBA. He has a history of doing cheap shots, cheap things in basketball. So I was wrong for defending him, and I'll come out and say that and get ahead of that. But I want your thoughts on that foul and kind of how it's kind of played out. Only 1 game suspension, but you end up losing Caruso for however many weeks. Then it makes me look back to the Nikola Jokic situation with the Morris twin, where he pushes him in the back. Now he's been out for however long. Jokic only got a 1 game suspension. What are your thoughts on that? Just the Grayson Allen situation.
Yeah, I mean, with Grayson Allen, I think some of it plays to what you were talking about with reputation, with intent. Like, Grayson Allen is a guy who absolutely has earned his reputation for the things that he's done. And dating back to college, it's rare that a guy kind of comes in with that from college, but Grayson Allen absolutely fits that description for a guy that, yeah. But as far as the foul itself, I mean, it's so when a guy is in the air, you really can't do a lot. And I mean, I was fired up about the LeBron foul on Embiid last year when he was up in the air, and that to me, the Allen one I think was worse than that to an extent, when it just kind of the throwing and the whole kind of motion of the sequence was pretty brutal. And obviously you feel for Caruso. You hate to see a play like that cost a guy that chunk of his season, a guy who's been playing very well, playing his role very effectively. So disappointed by it. I mean, the 1 game suspension, at the end of the day, that doesn't do a lot. I didn't like the Bucks organization sticking up for him so heavily either. Like that, I didn't just let it rock at that point. Like, let the league do their thing, and I didn't really like their statement about it. But I mean, what are you gonna do? I don't think Grayson Allen did it with ill intentions. I think it was a heat of the moment. It's so split second, these decisions and reactions and everything these guys do, that it's like he didn't go there to break Caruso's wrist, but at the end of the day, that's what happened. So yeah.
And the concerning thing for me, which I'll go ahead and say it, at this point with Grayson Allen's reputation in the NBA at this point now as well, he's kind of becoming a disgrace, to the Duke Brotherhood. And I hate to say that, because obviously he was part of a national championship team, but I mean, it's embarrassing to a sense, and it gives a bad narrative to, what Duke stands for. So I'll go ahead and throw that out there. But just as far as him like smirking afterwards too, there's nothing funny about a guy that's on the ground, throbbing in pain and, losing part of his season, like you said. So.
And disappointing as well, because Grayson Allen has like carved out a pretty effective NBA career for himself too. And this stuff just takes away from that. Like, this stuff just takes away from the on-court success that he has had. And like, unfortunately for him, I think regardless of like how well he plays, the first thing people think of about him is kind of the dirty side and those things, which he should hate himself, like for that being the case.
No, I 100% agree with you. God, he's killing me in the comments, man. It's killing me, but no, yeah, I'm with you, man. That's a great point, because he has carved out such a nice role with Milwaukee. Obviously coming from the championship, so they have high hopes this season. And he's a guy that I looked at, was like, damn, the Sixers could use a guy like that that can space the floor out and just hit every three imaginable. But I can't lobby for that guy to come to my team now. You know what I mean? Like, I can't want that. So it sucks what he's done. As we look at the Caruso injury, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the Bulls right now. I can't remember. They're still number 1 in the East, right?
I believe so.
So my thoughts here, obviously Lonzo Ball's out for 6 weeks, I believe. And then Caruso. So Chicago has dropped to number 2 in the East. Miami. So as these injuries are piling up, I know Levine came back, but he was dealing with a knee injury. As I said, Ball is actually out 8 weeks, not 6 weeks. And then Caruso is out 6 to 8 weeks. And then Levine's battling a knee injury, but he did play last night, if I'm not mistaken. Do you think that this could cause a plummet in the standings for the Bulls, I guess is what I'm trying to get at here?
It's tough how tight the East is. Like, when you look at these top 6, especially, like, the Sixers are in 6th place and are only 2.5 games out of first. The Bulls are a half game out of first, Nets a half game out of first, Bucks 1 game, Cavs 1.5 games, and Sixers 2.5. Like, that's a very compact stretch, so that it's like dropping a couple games can make a major difference seeding wise. There's some concern for me. I do really like this Bulls team. I like the way they constructed. I like the way they complement each other. There is some concern for me that they might have peaked too early, and that's not really their fault. When thinks of, like, you're going to have to get these guys back and clicking again once everybody returns, which is not the easiest thing to do. So I don't know. I hope they get it together from a fan perspective. They're a fun team to watch, so I like what they bring to the table. But I don't know. I think that's definitely a legitimate concern.
Yeah, especially when you talk about who they're missing, just as far as that backcourt with Lonzo and Caruso, who have looked great since they've arrived in Chicago, probably playing the best ball of their careers respectively.
Mm-hmm.
And they just lose them in that stretch, like you said, maybe just peaking a little too early, but definitely hope they can stay in the mix of it at least. I know there's a lot of people thinking that they could, drop into the play-in during this stretch, which would suck. I would hate to see that.
Yeah.
They're in a nice, exciting team, especially when they're healthy. The last thing I wanted to touch on you with is this Lakers team as they just continue their up and down. I don't even know if I should say an up and down. It's been mostly down season. They're 23-24 right now. They're currently the 8th seed in the West. And there's really no help in sight. But what I wanted to ask you regarding the Lakers is something interesting. I found a quote from Richard Jefferson basically stating that Anthony Davis is no longer a top 3 big man. And where does that leave the Los Angeles Lakers and what they can do in contention wise? So just wondering your thoughts on the Lakers. And then that comment from Richard Jefferson as far as Anthony Davis. Obviously, Jokic and Embiid are probably, number 1 and number 2, 1A, 1B as far as the top 2 big men in the NBA. But where would you put AD in that list these days?
Yeah, I agree, and I'll stick with a Charles Barkley line, call him Street Clothes Davis because of how often he's hurt. And I guess the thing that's frustrated me as like a Embiid, I guess, defender and supporter through all this is like AD's been a guy that's missed just as much time, but more time than Embiid has really, especially lately. And like I agree with the notion. I think AD's always been a guy that's a little bit overhyped in my mind, and dating back from Kentucky, I thought that, which we've been through the ups and downs of he certainly showed out, but I've never really bought into what the Lakers are selling with this team and just like the roster construction, the way things fit. And it frankly just doesn't quite gel together. And I mean, there's all the Russell Westbrook has become kind of the scapegoat and the target for all this, but like, I don't think it's Russell Westbrook is the only problem with this Lakers team. Like there's a lot going on. They still have LeBron James, so I'm not counting him out for anything. And he absolutely could put a run together in the playoffs and put a team on his back. But it's difficult to figure out what they can fully fix. Like we hear the shopping, the Talon Horton Tucker, their mix of like scraps and shooting for superstars, which, I just is a typical Lakers move that happens every year. But I just don't really see a clean fix or signs of them going up. So, yeah, I don't feel great about the state of the Lakers.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I guess some piggyback questions for you regarding the Lakers in that situation. Do you think they should consider firing Vogel, or is that kind of a moot point? Like, is this his fault? And then, do you think there is any market for a Russell Westbrook trade, as what's been rumored?
Yeah, I as far as Vogel goes, I again, this is a roster construction, not really a coaching issue. If that would change things, which it maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't, like it's worth a shot, I guess. But I don't think Vogel is the issue here by any means. And I think like it is absolutely the construction of rosters, like dating back to this offseason when I kind of compared them to the Al Horford Sixers team as far as like the spacing issues that were going to come. Like what they absolutely should have done is just gotten shooters. And I mean, Malik Monk has been awesome. And I've been a Malik Monk guy for a time. He's been probably, in my opinion, the biggest bright spot on that team has been Malik Monk. I don't know. I don't know what the kind of route the Lakers can go is. So I don't really know what the fix is. And I don't know. It's LeBron James at the end of the day. So yeah.
I'm getting you. I'm catching your drift. It's a rough spot in LA right now. And I can't help but agree. It just looks like there's no help, right? Like, usually, at least with the Sixers, we can say like, oh, we got Seth Curry injured right now. We got Matisse on the mend, Danny Green, right? Like we still have Ben Simmons sitting out, but there's nothing there. Like there's nobody coming to rescue LeBron in this group. And, you just got to hope that LeBron and that group can just turn something on. Somebody said on to Philly.
Why not?
Why not, man? Hey, let's talk about it. But no, it's interesting. Just looking at the grand scheme of the NBA right now, how would you say as far as compared to last year? What are your thoughts as far as like just the parity? Do you think that there's a better chance for an underlying team like the Bucks did last year to go in and win the championship? Like what are your thoughts? is it more open this year compared to last season, or do you think last season was really that grand opportunity?
Last season was probably the cleanest it's been. I mean, I think that it's still very open for both conferences too. Like I think East and West are there's a lot of like West teams that can hot. I love the Grizzlies team this year. I think they should be considered more heavily than they are being given credit. As far as the East goes, like teams like the Cavs are still very good, and there's a lot of teams that can put together stretches. We're not going to know until the trade deadline for what exactly when we're from a Sixers perspective.
Yeah,
that changes drastically. But I mean, the Nets are still to me the scariest team in the East when we think about the big three of KD, Kyrie, and Harden once they're all healthy. The Bucks are still a very good team. The Heat look pretty good. There's a lot of competition. So I think the East absolutely got better from last year, but I'm not ruling any team out.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you, and I think that's a good place to leave it as we get ready for a ton of NBA action tonight. Seems like Tuesdays are the busy night, and then we'll get a random night during the week where there's like 2-3 games. But we got a ton on the schedule tonight, so hopefully you guys will all get a chance to check out some of your favorite teams. I see we got the Lakers and the Nets tonight. That should be interesting. The Mavericks and the Warriors. That'll be a fun one. Other than that, it's pretty dry. Clippers and Wizards, Nuggets, Pistons, Hornets, Raptors. So night of NBA, not the best action, but at least you got some entertainment. Sean, before I get you out of here, my man, is there anything you got going on? If you just want to tell everybody where they can find your content.
Yeah, man. Check me out on Twitter at Sean_Barnard1. You can see all my written work on PhillySportsNetwork.com, all linked up through that. Check out Pick Swap Podcast. That's at Pick Swap Pod on Twitter. Check us out on YouTube. Drop a subscribe, and a lot of good stuff coming out of there. But yeah, a little bit of everywhere.
And definitely check out Sean at the game tonight. Make sure you're following him at Sean_Barnard1 on Twitter. And also make sure you're following Pick Swap Pod on TikTok. I know we're getting accustomed there on TikTok, and I've seen my partner there, Sean, Pick Swap Pod over on TikTok as well. You guys got some great content going on there, and of course Instagram as well. So you're on all the platforms. So make sure you're following Sean and the Pick Swap Podcast on all major platforms. For myself, for Sean, for DSM Media, thank you for tuning in today, everyone. We appreciate you all, and I will see